Hello, everyone, and welcome to Career Tech's continuing series of panel discussions on industry trends and employment opportunities. Our focus today is on a sector of our economy that is one of the state's largest. Currently, aviation and defense employs roughly 1 in 10 workers here in the state. But in order to continue to thrive, the aerospace industry needs a future workforce with the right skills. I'm Rob McClendon, and I'll be leading today's discussion with a group of panelists made up of industry leaders that I think you'll find both interesting and insightful. Wade Wolf is the Vice Director of the Oklahoma City Air Logistics Complex, otherwise known as Tinker Air Force Base. Ryan Gertson is Vice President of Workforce Development at the AAR Corporation. Grayson Arties is the State Director of Aeronautics at the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. And Eddie Compton is the Aerospace Defense Industry Liaison for Oklahoma Career Tech. I also want to welcome everyone else that has joined us today. If you have questions for any of our panelists, just type them into our chat and we'll have someone monitoring those. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'd like to begin with pretty much the same question for everyone. I think a good place always to start is with everyone's career pathway story into the role that you now serve, both personally and professionally. And Wade, since you're at the top of my introduction list, let's go ahead and start with you. Where did your interest in aviation begin?
All right. Well, first, thank you. The only thing that I don't like is that we're not in person and having this conversation. But those are the rules under COVID. I'm honored that you asked me to come talk today. I am a guy that grew up in Midwest City, Oklahoma, and went to Midwest City High School. It bothers me a little bit that Traub Elementary School, the school I went to, is closed. The junior high, German junior high, is now closed, and next is the high school. I thought I was going to go to medical school. Worked at Midwest City Emergency Room, worked in Stillwater Hospital. Was going to go to medical school. It was my path that I was going to go down. And the good thing is, while I worked in the emergency room, it was just not the right thing for me. Lost my compassion, it was not the right career path. So I'm glad I didn't do that. So I'm at Oklahoma State, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I have a natural affinity for business. I have a natural affinity for finance, accounting, those kinds of things. And so in about 18 months, I finished 2 degrees at Oklahoma State, and it required me. Thank goodness, it was back in the day that you had to hand scribe, because this is the mid 80s. You have to hand scribe all the class ads and things like that. And I took 21 hours. I took 24 hours. I took 6 hours in intercession, 12 hours in the summer, and just banged it out. Then there was a recruiter for a Palace Acquire intern, and I got hired on as a Palace Acquire intern in 1990. And I was one of 3 on the whole installation. And so I started off in the aircraft organization, working in an overhead function with a production engineering group. And then I moved into the financing area, moved into the organization that I'm in charge of now, which is we tear apart airplanes and we put them back together, tear apart other different end items and we put them back together. But more importantly, we are a business. We call ourselves a working capital fund, and we are just like AAR. I have revenue, I have cost of goods sold, I have a balance sheet, I have an income statement, cash flows king. I depreciate equipment, I have a profit loss. The only thing that's a little bit different for me is that we have to balance to a 0 profit loss over time. So if I make 100 million this year, I got to lose 100 million in a future year. And so understanding that's what this role is, running a business. What are the steps above me that whether that's at the Pentagon or in a program management acquisition area. So I moved up and made sure that I was vertically integrated in all the different processes that when I took this job made me the most knowledgeable. And so that's kind of been I've worked in a number of different areas, from production to business development, to program management, to cost analysis. And so I've been to the Pentagon for a couple of years. So that's kind of my career path. So I'll let others talk. I spoke way too long. So.
Well, I do just want to follow up with you, and you just answered a question that we do here in education. You don't have to enlist to work on Tinker Air Force Base. You're a good example.
Right. So I'm glad you asked that question, because many of the folks that are listening or watching, I have 10,600 people that work on the team that I serve. 100 are military. That means 10,500 are civilians. And so very similar to, and I keep touching to AR because they're going to follow me, I guess. We're very much similar. I have jet engine mechanics. I have aircraft mechanics. I do NDI, welding, et cetera. I have engineers. I have software engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers. So I have blue collar and I have white collar. And so some of those jobs need to have a positive degree requirement. Others, I have a relationship with Eddie and his team with the VOTEX. And so we hire a number of folks. I would say over the last 10 years, we probably hired 1,000 people from the VOTEC. And that's something I'm really proud of. So you don't need to enlist to come work on this team. And we are, it is really a rewarding career working here at Tinker Air Force Base, not only with the benefits, but I had someone come and tell me just today in the parking lot, hey, listen, I was in Afghanistan. You don't understand how this organization supports the warfighter. We would have grounded aircrafts in Afghanistan if it hadn't been for your team. And so that's kind of cool when you think about it. And so we're in the fight, but we're not a blue suiter. So.
All right. Fantastic. Yes. So Ryan, let's go ahead and jump to AAR. How did you get involved in aerospace?
Awesome. Thanks, Rob, and appreciate everybody taking the time today. And I think I'm going to step back kind of all the way to the beginning, because I think it's very much, as I think about the work that I've done with students over my career, you know, a lot of people may not see themselves in aviation and may not know anybody in aviation, or may not, you know, have anybody to guide them. And I was one of those folks. And I was born and raised in a little town in Henderson, Nebraska. And so I was raised on a farm. It was a generational farm. I knew nobody in aviation. I didn't even barely know how to spell it. And so for me, you know, growing up on the farm, raising corn, you know, I would get up every day with my dad and I'd see those crop dusters take off. And I always thought that looked a whole lot more fun than what I was doing. And so for me, you know, having that little exposure, you know, allowed me to kind of start asking questions, you know, to the crop dusting organization and ultimately, you know, where are these schools? I had no idea where to even start. And so ultimately I went to the University of Nebraska and I started out first as a pilot. And so I started out in high school getting my private pilot certificate. I then did all of my degree through the University of Nebraska. I did my CFI through them, CFII through them. And then I went to work for a regional airline flying jets. And then, you know, adversity happened and I ended up getting sick. I ended up not being able to fly anymore. And I went into the maintenance side of the organization, safety side of the organization, which I really didn't, that wasn't what my degree specifically was in, right? I always wanted to be a pilot, but you know, life had a different turn for me, and so it allowed me to really grow on the airline side. And then I ended up moving to Oklahoma City and working for AAR my first time from 2008 to 2011, and then a guy by the name of Jeremy Gibson, who owned and operated Spartan College of Aeronautics and Technology in Tulsa, said, "Hey, would you be interested in being my VP of Education?" And I really had never been in the educational world, but I jumped into that opportunity, eventually became the president of the school, and really opened my eyes to, the folks that are on the screen, the educational process, dealing with the Department of Ed, Veteran Affairs, all the people you deal with in higher education, and really understanding, what does it take to move the needle in helping kids, families, mom and dad make a decision that I know, having lived it in aviation, is going to change their life. But how do you get them engaged and really understanding? And so I did that for about 9 years, and I came back to AAR in the role that I'm in right now in workforce development. And my job is all about what we're talking about today. And we launched our Eagle Career Pathway program in 2018. It's all about getting parents, counselors, superintendents, principals, anybody that can have influence in somebody's life, a child's life or a young adult's life, in understanding the career path of aviation and specifically maintenance, and the fact that there are more jobs in aviation than just being a pilot, being a flight attendant, being an air traffic controller, being a technician, and being a ground worker. Somebody that loads bags. And I think we have a huge challenge in front of us in making sure that people understand that this is a 6-figure career if they so want it to be. And steps along the way, we don't start at that level, but that level is 100%. So I talk about that in my pathway, and I think it's important because I've been a pilot, I've been in maintenance, I've been in safety, I've been in education, and now, leading our workforce initiatives at AAR. So Rob, I'll turn it back over.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Hey, Grayson, pretty much the same question to you. What were your motivations to enter the world of aeronautics?
Thank you, Rob, and thanks for having me today. It's been a fun life in aviation aerospace. I had a grandfather who was a pilot for the FAA and the Marshal Service, who'd kind of worked me into aviation. I knew that's what I wanted to do in high school. Of course, I was wanting to be the pilot, so I was kind of like Ryan. I wanted to be the pilot. I wanted to fly those cross-Atlantic or cross-Pacific routes on 777s or 747s, and got into the University of Oklahoma's aviation program, got all my flight certificates, and kind of quickly started realizing that flying, especially when I graduated in 2009, may not have been everything it was chalked up to be. Plus, we were going through a great recession at that point in time, too. So I took a flyer on this little internship at an agency called the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. Really had no idea what it was, just knew it was a paid internship in my last semester of college, and it sounded like a good idea. And then here I am 13 years later. Never would have dreamt that I would have been at an agency like this, but here I am today living the dream. And kind of like what Ryan said, the things I've learned over the last 12 or 13 years are, if you want to do it, regardless of what the career is, if it's being a doctor, being an accountant, financial person, logistics, maintenance, pilot, air traffic controller, skilled labor, you name it, you can do it in aviation aerospace right here in Oklahoma. And I think that's probably one of the coolest and neatest things about our aviation aerospace industry is the different facets and the different little niche areas that we can touch as a career field. And so if you want to do it, come do it in aviation aerospace.
Yeah, and I think that's encouraging about the internship and mentorships. I think those are really important. Eddie, last but not least, what is your origin story?
I couldn't afford a ticket to fly on a plane, so I had to join the United States Air Force when I was younger. I talked to a recruiter, and he told me if I joined that I could fly free. And he was right. So I joined, and I said, I'll do whatever you want me to. And they made me a radio operator. So I was dropped off by planes, and I would tell people if it was a good place to land or not. And then when it was time to go, I'd hop back on the plane and leave. So I did that initially, and then moved into GLICM, which is ground launch cruise missiles. So we got an opportunity to do radio operations for that. Got back into the Air Force when I went back to Germany, and we went to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and I did what they call quick reaction packages. We set up comm bases for flying wings so that they could have the communications. Back then, we didn't have satellites, so we were pretty much the only communications you had when you got out there. We had satellites, but no one could afford them, so there was not a whole lot of bandwidth. So we did a lot of HF and line of sight communications back then. Got back to California, went back to the nuclear mission, did B-52s and KC-135s with CrewCom. Moved here to Tinker when that base closed, and 3 months after I got here, my job went away. And so my commander told me that I was a gift because I wasn't on his books and he could use me as he saw fit. And that started my career of learning everything there needs to be in the Air Force unit, from maintenance to quality control to intelligence, flight operations. And I moved from one unit to the other and went through my career as a first sergeant for 12 years. And took care of people. I was the guy they called at night when someone did something stupid down in Oklahoma City, and I had to go down to jail and find out if he was going to come home or not. And so I did that. Then I became, I made chief, and the intelligence unit immediately brought me back, and I had to get to a terrible assignment in Oahu for a while with intelligence, and then I became the command chief at Fort Meade in Maryland. Did my time there, and then the Air Force was nice enough to let me come back to the flying wing, AWACS, to do my final assignment as the command chief there. And then I got out and I had the GI Bill, so I went to Oklahoma City University to get my master's. I had no intention of working for a long while. And then this crazy person that some of these people on here know, called Ben Robinson, called me up and told me to interview for this job. And I did, and I've been here ever since. So that's kind of my thing. I also liaison as an aerospace and defense liaison with all these great people on here, Wade Wolf, Ryan, and Grayson, as well as other military and commercial aerospace companies. And we try to make sure that we line up what they need with our career tech workforce development so that we get them the best thing. And we continue to work to even make it better in the future. And one of the things that we were hoping to get out of the day is to get the information out to everyone that, hey, aerospace is alive, it's thriving, it's growing, and there's great opportunities. And we want to make sure that if people are interested, or if we are not interested, we want to make them interested. If they are interested, we want to give them the right ideas on what they could do to become working in that career field, because it's treated all of us very, very well, and we love being in it, and we want to get more people to do it. So that's kind of my story on and that's a short version because my intros are usually 20, 25 minutes. So I thought I did very well.
Thank you, Eddie. We thank Ben for recommending you. Yeah. So now that we know where everyone is coming from, I'd like to hear each of your insights on just trends and opportunities that are available in aerospace. And I may have a couple of follow-ups, but I want to start off with just the economic impact, aviation has on our state and our country. And I'm not really sure most Oklahomans fully appreciate just how large and diverse the industry is. And Grayson, I'm sure this is something you find yourself talking about quite a bit. Why don't you start us off?
It is. So we did a economic impact study of the state's aviation aerospace industry published in 2017. And it took the entire look of every little niche company all the way on up to big boys, Tinker, Boeing, AAR, American, Mike Monroe Aeronautical Center, and beyond. It showed that the industry here in Oklahoma is almost $44 billion of annual economic impact. That's over 1,100 different companies. That's almost 120,000 direct jobs, plus an additional 80,000 indirect or induced jobs. And so it's a big industry in Oklahoma. Most people don't know about it. Most people know about energy, oil, and gas, which is our state's #1 industry. They know about agriculture, which is #3, but they don't really have an understanding of aviation aerospace. And I think that's part of our struggle that we all live, is that we don't have that ingrained inherent marketing opportunity that some of the other industries have here in the state. But probably the most interesting statistic that came out of the study that we did was the average annual salary for a direct employee working in the industry was $73,300. That was almost double the average salary of the average Oklahoman. So these are good paying jobs. As you heard, Ryan, there's lots of opportunities for 6-figure careers in aviation aerospace. And I think probably the most interesting just story that aviation aerospace has here is the heritage of what we've done over the last decade plus in the industry. You've heard about the big companies like Tinker, like American, like Mike Monroe Aeronautical Center. But what you don't hear about is some of the small companies that are dotted across the more rural landscape of Oklahoma. Companies like Mint Turbines in Stroud, or Consolidated Turbines in Bristow, or ASIC in Enid, or GAMI in Ada. There are those kinds of small companies all across the state, and they have a real impact in those small towns. And so just because, we look at the two big clusters, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and someone goes, well, I might not want to move to the big city, doesn't mean there's not a career opportunity for you in aviation aerospace. There are tons of small companies dotted across Oklahoma. And that's what the aviation aerospace industry really showed us when we did that economic impact was how diverse it was, from small companies to big companies, from parts manufacturers to pilots and FBOs and mechanics. It was just very wide, very diverse. And it was actually it's probably one of the most exciting career opportunities I've had. The projects to work on was that economic impact study we did. And so happy to answer any questions people may have, and happy to go visit and talk to people about aviation aerospace in their local towns. Anything you guys want to hear about, I'm more than happy to come out and visit with individuals.
Great. And there's no one bigger than Tinker. So Wade, you mentioned over 10,000 civilian jobs. That has to have a huge economic impact.
Sure. So I'm the single largest site employer for the state. My impact to the community is over $3 billion. My annual payroll that I have just in my organization is over $1 billion. Not only am I the single largest site employer, but I'm the single largest site employer for engineers. And that's something people really don't know. In fact, it's my single largest growth area in the organization. I could hire every electrical and software engineer from every school that is graduated in the state of Oklahoma and still need more. So I have a very elaborate recruiting process to go throughout this region: Arkansas, Louisiana, Kansas, Missouri, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Nebraska, et cetera. It's pretty cool when you think about that. The salaries, the engineering salaries are obviously different. We start off a little low, but in a very short order, you're making $60,000 to $70,000 plus a full benefit package, plus what that means later on down the road. 10 years down the road, you're going to be approaching $90,000 and $100,000 as it relates to engineering. In the blue collar worker, we'll start you off roughly $40,000. But once you get to that journeyman level, what we refer to as a wage grade 10, you get into that journeyman level, and a couple of years later after that, you're in mid 50s, low 60s if you work a nominal amount of overtime. So it is right now a growing business. What makes it exciting for us is I'm building 14 brand new hangars and going to hire 1,000 more employees just to work in a brand new airplane that we're bringing on board. We've inducted about 4 aircraft right now. The KC-46A, which is going to replace the Cold War vintage KC-135 aerial refueling tanker. The KC-46A is our newest add-on to that. It's based on a 767. But we're going to hire 1,000 more jobs. Beyond that, in the next 10 years, we're looking to bring on the B-21 aircraft. It's going to replace the B-2. And I don't know what the numbers are going to be there, but it's going to be several hundred at a minimum. Could approach 1,000. But it's also it's going to be more composite-based work versus sheet metal kind of work. And so over the next 10 years, not only am I probably going to hire 2,000 more people to include engineers, to include blue collar workers. But then on top of that, I attrit about 600 people a year. So that is a significant amount of hiring that we do. It is a growing industry. And I agree with you that the state of Oklahoma, you think about agriculture, you think about oil and gas, you don't really think about aerospace. And it is a booming, booming business for us. And when I go talk to the high schools, Mr. Compton, Eddie Compton knows this. When I go talk to the high schools, I tell them, look, there's more options than college, going to go work in the fast food, and joining the military. All of those are really good endeavors. But let me tell you about something, that jobs are not moving out of the country. When an airplane needs work done, it has to have work done wherever it went down at. And they're not going to move the military work that we're doing right now. So, or at least I don't think they are.
So I guess we all should just look up and to aviation. So Ryan,
yes.
Jump in here now with AAR. Both tell us just about the state and then also the country.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's just fascinating, Wade, just to listen. I can't wait to connect with you after this, just to understand just how tremendous, not only Tinker is, but just the greater aviation. And I think, one of the great things I have with my job is I get to go across the country to facilities, and I deal with educational folks all over those facilities. And I think what we have in the state of Oklahoma is second to none. The career tech system is absolutely amazing. You combine that with your community colleges and universities, the pathways that students have to just these wide-ranging careers, that Wade was talking about, and I think is something that, it frustrates me to hear that Oklahomans don't know about aerospace, right? Because of the history, the amazing system that's in place, the great companies that are in Oklahoma, and just the sheer need, as Grayson said, second, very close to oil and gas, and it might even overtake oil and gas potentially. And so, when you look at AAR, it's a global aerospace company. We have 60 locations around the world. Our maintenance, repair, and overhaul business started right in Oklahoma in the 1970s. We have facilities in Rockford, Illinois, Indianapolis, Indiana, Miami, Florida. We have a couple in Canada. And we also are building a new one out in Nagpur, India. And those facilities, commercial work on commercial airplanes. Most of your airlines that most major air carriers do business in some fashion with AAR. We also do some defense work on commercial derivative type airplanes like 737s, for example. And I think when we look at the job market, and I think this is very hard, it's very hard to understand if you're not in aviation, that we were truly, last February, we were in a workforce crisis in aviation and aerospace just a year ago. We could not find people to work in aviation and aerospace. And we had, just at AAR, across our network, almost 200 openings that we couldn't fill for technician positions that, kind of Wade talked about this, just the kind of entry-level salaries are similar. We bring people in that have little to no experience at kind of that's, 16 to 19, and you can grow all the way into the $35 an hour range. And one of the things that in MRO, at least in commercial MRO, we're often a stepping stone to an air carrier. And so air carriers look to us to create that talent that they need, that 3 to 5 years of heavy jet maintenance experience. And we end up losing folks over to those kinds of organizations. And I think one of the things that Grayson really caught my attention is the fact that you may have to move, right? And that's totally fine, right? And I think creating that that understanding and making sure that people understand that you may move out of Oklahoma and 4 years later you're going to and never and stay in Oklahoma the rest of your career. And I think all of us on this panel have moved all over the country as a part of our aviation careers typically, and somehow we come back, right? And so I think that I encourage you guys, as you're counseling students, talking to students, that make the first move. Just take the first aviation job and see where it takes. And I think that's a big component that I think we need to make sure that we consider as we look at promoting the aviation career, not just in Oklahoma, but all of the United States.
It should be competitive.
Thank you, Ryan. I hear a little feedback here, Andrew, if you could mute that. But I really want to ask what you said. When you said February, that made me think of COVID-19. I know that's impacted some of the airlines. Ryan, Wade, how about you guys? What impact does COVID-19 have?
No doubt that COVID-19 had a significant impact on our organization, as we are heavily reliant, at least in our commercial airline businesses. And we're about, it's about 60, prior to COVID, it was about 60% commercial, 40% military. And it's kind of evening out now, kind of 50-50. But what we saw is, of course, a significant reduction in the early days, as airlines themselves just stopped flying, right? They grounded airplanes. They put those airplanes into long-term storage programs. And if you go out to the Will Rogers Airport, you'll see some of those airplanes in longer-term storage out at AAR. But we've had tremendous customers that have a lot that saw beyond COVID and recognizing that we need to make sure that we secure the workforce, that we make sure that we secure the facilities that we need that are going to be needed again quickly. And I think what you're seeing today, at least in our business, is we're busy. We're busy in Oklahoma City. We're busy in Miami. We never laid off anybody in Rockford, and it's getting busier every day. And it's because of the lag time. So as the airlines stop doing all maintenance, right, airplanes have to be maintained even if they're sitting on the ground doing nothing. And so what you're seeing is our businesses are probably, well, not probably, they are accelerating along a little bit faster than maybe what you see in the news from the commercial airline side, just simply because the way that the maintenance works, right? If you want to make sure your airplanes are available in the summer of this year, right, to fly your summer schedule, you have to get them in maintenance now. And so we definitely are seeing a lot more work in our facilities. We've had, and customers are bringing back airplanes to places where we've had just long-term relationships like we had in Oklahoma, and the need for skilled technicians is going to come back. It's already coming back. And I think what you're going to find is over the next couple of years, COVID has just exacerbated the problem that we had, which is a lack of the skilled workforce that we need. And we truly have to double down our efforts to make sure that people see aviation as a viable career path moving forward.
Yeah, and maybe that focus will turn out to be a good thing. Now, Wade mentioned the transition from sheet metal to composites. What other trends, and I'll open this up to everyone, what trends have you observed in aerospace, and what changes can we expect in the industry?
I think one of the two biggest changes we'll see here on the horizon, obviously the transition to unmanned systems and autonomous systems. That's usually the big, flashy, fancy topic that gets everybody really excited about aviation aerospace these days. As more and more regulations open up at the federal level, it's not going to be out of the realm of possibility to start seeing some package delivery or even some autonomous people transportation in some of the more larger metro areas for folks trying to go from point A to point B in an autonomous aerial vehicle. That urban air mobility concept is definitely going to hit us hard. The other thing that people are going to start seeing a transition to is EV or electric vehicles, aircraft, and that's going to really be an interesting subset to the industry as battery technology gets better, as electric motors get more efficient. We're going to start seeing that transition to additional fuel sources or other fuel sources for your traditional smaller piston aircraft, especially. And that urban air mobility sector is really what's driving that, because you're looking to try and find a small aircraft that can be powered powerfully for a decent enough time period to carry a package or people to the destination. And the best way to do that is by electric propulsion. So I think those are a couple of things that we have on the forefront of aviation aerospace that are, one, really going to try and get those young people interested in an aviation aerospace career, and hopefully we can get them hooked soon enough that they come and decide to spend some time in aviation aerospace, as opposed to going and doing something with Google or Amazon or any of the other tech companies, which seems to be the real drive for young folks that are wanting to get into technology and engineering type careers.
Yeah. I'm always struck that if you like video games, I think you would like aviation.
That's very positive.
Yeah. Is there any other certain areas of aviation you foresee having the greatest potential for growth?
Well, Wade mentioned the composites, and that's down the road. That's something that we're looking at. But also, it used to be 10 years ago when an aircraft rudder didn't work, you looked out the rear view mirror while the other guy moved the rudders and controls in the cockpit. And if it didn't work, you're like, okay, we probably got a bad wire. We got to go fix it. Nowadays, if the rudder doesn't work, you might have to get someone out there and check the programming and find out why the rudder's not working. So we're leaning more and more, going away from steam gauges and going to digital cockpits, and that glass cockpits in the military and the commercial already been there for a while. And we're going to have to continue that strength in that aviation community to understand programming, understand how those things work. How do you do troubleshooting on electronics and avionics, although you might be on the ground maintenance. So it will just grows more like, I'd use the example that when we first got cell phones, all we had to do is flip it open and answer it. Now you can work off your cell phone and do all kinds of things. So as this aviation things grows, that things that we got computer engineers and electronic engineers doing today in the depot with Wade is probably going to get pushed down to some of those workers in the future that's going to have a basic knowledge of some of those things to do the maintenance that they need to do. And a lot of people say, well, you're looking 20 or 30 years down the road. And I don't think so. I think if you look at the aircraft that we have coming in the military and what's already in the commercial sector, those beautiful Alaskan aircraft over to AAR, it takes some people with some noggin sense to get through that thing and figure out how to make it work. So that troubleshooting and stuff has to be brought into the future. And I think the FAA realizes that, and they're going to give us some opportunities in the future to be a little bit more relaxed in how we do our training and add those things in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just going to, if I could on top of that, Eddie, I think he's absolutely right. When you look at, the electronic side of things, I mean, obviously Career Tech has 5 A&P aviation maintenance training programs in the network. And then, Spartan College also so the state itself is well positioned in creating aviation technicians. But I think to your point, Eddie, about, this need for this electronic technician, knowing that the airplanes are so advanced, at least on the front end of them, and the integration of systems throughout these airplanes, I think creates a tremendous opportunity. I know for us at AAR, if you think about what's happening with the Boeing 737 MAX, obviously everybody knows about the grounding, but it is ungrounded. And the airplane is going to transform the airline industry just because of its tremendous efficiency. Wade talked about composite structure, just like the 787 did, back, when it launched with, almost all of it was a composite structure, and did things that were very unconventional, using electricity versus hydraulic power versus, things of that nature, which were, I think all about creating that efficiency, making the airplane greener, as you look at it. But I think as we look at and prepare for the future, we know the 737 MAX is the future. That airplane is radically different than a 737 NG. And so not only is it different all the way around, but it's also bigger. And so facilities and those kinds of things also play a role in making sure that we keep Oklahoma, front and center in keeping it where businesses want to come to do aviation work.
Hey, let me add just one thing on top of what Ryan just said. A couple of things, actually. One, airframe and power plant is absolutely something that the industry is going to need folks with those licenses. The market there is exceptional. Ryan talked about this a little bit ago. He had 200 job openings. If you have an airframe and power plant license, especially in you are in your early to mid 20s or even in your early 30s, you have a very powerful license to do something that makes you very, very marketable. There is a shortage of A&P mechanics, and the Oklahoma VOTEC system has an excellent system to teach people how to be an A&P mechanic. I am not certain everyone who's participating in this webinar, but if there's people who are going, what do I need to do? How do I get into this market? How do I get one of those jobs? The VOTEC program for A&P is spectacular in the state of Oklahoma. Contact your local VOTEC program. I agree with what everyone has said about electrical, the focus on electrical type work, comm systems, radar systems, et cetera. Absolutely imperative, especially when we go to unmanned aerial vehicles, which is definitely a growth industry. I'm doing unmanned aerial vehicle jet engines at Tinker Air Force Base. Then there's engineers, and the need for engineers could not be higher. And again, chemical, mechanical, electrical, software, fill in the blank. And finally, there's folks who need to understand the business of the business. Ryan, Grayson, Eddie all have great plans that they want to go execute. But if they aren't making money, if they're not creating markets, if they're not growing their business, if they're not generating cash flow, they're going to be a dinosaur. All right. And so having the business acumen is absolutely necessary. And so folks who have degrees in finance and accounting, especially, make that really simple, especially if you have a natural affinity for aerospace and enjoy that kind of work. I'm like a kid in a candy store when I'm at the airport, and you're looking at all the different airplanes. And my son will tell you that I take him to Wiley Post Airport here in the city, and we watch airplanes take off. And I go, look, that's a Piper. Look, that's a Cessna. Look, that's a Beechcraft. Look, I bet you've never seen an engine in the front and in the back of the airplane. I mean, it's just things like that you see, and it is spectacular when you do that. So that's what I would add to that.
I want to dig a little deeper with our employers. What other characteristics and maybe soft skills are you looking for in potential employees?
I think communication is a big one these days. We see people coming out of high school and in college with either poor or just no communication skills, how to communicate at a business level, how to communicate within the team. And so I think really putting some emphasis on how to communicate, how to just write a basic letter or even just talk to a fellow employee. I think that's really something that we need to emphasize. But that's not just an aviation aerospace issue in and of itself. That's just a general business issue that we see with folks coming out of whether it's high school, associate's degree program, or a bachelor's or master's degree program, is communication. And the other thing I would mention would be teamwork and working within a team, especially how are we going to live in the team environment moving forward now that we've all experienced COVID. and we're all doing this in a very virtual environment today. I'm very much a team in the room kind of person, like Wade was saying at the beginning of the presentation. How's that going to change moving forward now that a majority of our, teamwork efforts or presentations or discussion topics are going to be in the virtual environment?
Wait, I cut you off a little bit. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on those characteristics you look
So, Grayson stole some of my words. I won't hold it against him. Look, communication, absolutely paramount, written and oral. If you're a high school student, sign up for debate. If you're in college, or even if you're not in college, sign up for Toastmasters. Learn how to speak in a public environment. Learn how to communicate, be persuasive. Teamwork, absolutely important. I'm probably the oldest person in the room, next to Eddie. Back when I grew up, we did things in individuals, and we didn't do a lot of teaming. How to work in a functional way in a team is paramount. There's other things. Look, I need problem solvers. I need people who not only are honest, trustworthy, people that I can turn my back on, but that are innovative, committed to doing the very best they can every single day, to try to help solve problems, to improve flow, to improve cost effectiveness, to improve safety. All those things are, in my mind, the most important things. And if you are an effective communicator, if you are trustworthy, if you can work in a teaming environment, that you're committed, you're striving to always do the very best you can, and you're a problem solver, you're going to have one of our jobs in no time at all.
Yeah, I would just say, from an AAR perspective, I know that, when we launched our Eagle Career Pathway program, which is just a really, when we launched it, we wanted it to be a marketing tool to our partner schools, that they could to really use and understand, how do I move from student to career. And inside of Eagle, we talk about, we kind of take the word Eagle and we put to it ethics, airworthiness, greatness, leadership, and engagement. And it goes back to the heart of the technical things. We know that when they get to us, we're going to have to continue to build them up and give them the experiences that they need. But the soft skills, right? If you don't have the right attitude, you don't have the integrity built in, because you're going into aviation, the safest mode of transportation, right? It takes an incredible group of people who understand their role, who can sit there and raise their hand when they make a mistake, and without fear, right? We've created that environment, over the last 40 years. And that's why, thank goodness, very seldom do you ever hear about an aviation incident or accident in the United States, right? Because of that, right? Lots of people have died in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even into the 80s, making the regulations and making the systems the way they are today. And so, I always tell people who don't know aviation, you could randomly choose a flight for the next 25,000 years and never be involved in a commercial airline incident or accident. That's an incredible statistics. So soft skills are very important to us, beyond just technical.
So if I'm hearing everyone correctly, there's the pathway that may require a college degree, but there's even more opportunity out there that with some skills training. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I could, I'm going to jump in on this one. I know, Eddie, we have a great, not only we have great A&P schools, but we've also got other unique programs in Oklahoma, especially the Francis Tuttle sheet metal program. For us, that started in 2006 at AAR, and I know Wade hired a lot of Tinker out of that program. But I got to say, and I got to give kudos to Eddie and the team, I asked them, hey, what do you guys think about if I could take that curriculum that we kind of jointly developed, and I'd like to take that across the country to other locations, especially our Chicago location. And I took that curriculum into South Chicago, and it's been what that program has done. We've graduated 4 cohorts of students, and this is a 60-day, 300-hour program. And in 60 days, I can take somebody out of South Chicago who's never known anything about aviation, and I can give them the introductory skills that they need to come into my facility in Rockford and be successful. And not only that, but these are people of color that and also women who are highly underrepresented in aviation. And it's part of our initiative as a good corporate citizen that we're providing opportunities to the underrepresented, and you can do it in a short as 60 days and put them on a path. And by the way, that path also will lead 18 months later to either a repairman certificate by the FAA or a full-blown airframe certificate issued by the FAA. So we create that path. And you do not necessarily, and I think the message is everybody has a different situation. And I think that aviation has innovated itself in a way that there are different paths to any career. And ultimately, most of them end in some sort of associate's degree, some sort of bachelor's degree, but maybe not all at once.
No, we just have about 8 minutes left, and I really would like you guys to talk to the teachers and the instructors about how best they can prepare their students for an aviation career. I'll just open that up to everyone.
I'll take a stab at that one, Rob, because that was going to be my ending point. I know we've talked a lot about career tech programs, college programs, but we have to get kids interested and excited about aviation careers. Going back to the elementary, middle school, and high school time periods, there's wonderful opportunities. We have a grant program at the Aeronautics Commission where we will do everything from a one-day camp all the way on up to funding full-week camps and robotics programs. There's a great thing called the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association high school curriculum, which is free so long as the teacher is trained up, and we have 16 high schools around the state that are teaching that, hoping to bring that up to 30 or 40 in the next year. Oklahoma's number 3 in the country for schools enrolled in that high school curriculum. And that's a big deal. Trying to get students excited about aviation careers, get them out to the local airport. That's usually where most people get the idea to join aviation aerospace, is seeing airplanes fly. That's just the sexy part of aviation. That's the exciting part about aviation, is aircraft up in the air. And so just get kids out to aviation and seeing it crawl around on some airplanes, watch some airplanes fly overhead, so on and so forth. And those are the things that I think we need to be doing to get kids interested and excited about aviation aerospace careers.
You know, I sit on the Youth and Aviation Task Force with the Department of Transportation, and that group came out of the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act that said, hey, we need to really look at what are we doing as an industry to get youth involved. I would say to the teachers, counselors, and people that are direct facing to the students, Grayson is 100% right. We need greater flow into the pipelines that have been already created. And there's nobody that has better influence and more influence on that than you. And I think the FAA, and I think what we need to do is, out of this call, there's some great resources that are provided through the Federal Aviation Administration, and just providing some really cool curriculum. I always use the example, you know, if you're talking about potential and kinetic energy, there's no better video than the Boeing 747-800 doing a maximum brake test. And it's a 960,000 pound airplane getting all the way to takeoff and then slamming on the brakes, right? And the brakes, you know, are red hot, tires explode, you know, and it talks about, you know, an engineer is talking about potential and kinetic energy, right? And so I think there are tremendous opportunities to little snippets into varying degrees of curriculum across the board. And to Grayson's point, get out to an airport, or if you know of somebody, just ask them, hey, would you come in and talk to my class, or could we go out to your facility? And I know we're doing tours. Before COVID, we did tours all the time, and it's just a matter sometimes of just asking.
Well, my final question is always the same. I would like each of you to give us your best advice to students that may be watching this. If you could talk to the 15-year-old you, what would you tell them knowing what you know now?
All right, I'll start. You have a passion. I don't know what that passion is. You have a passion. Understand what that passion is, fuel it. Don't let anyone tell you no. Work harder and smarter than anyone else. It doesn't matter if you want to be a plumber, an electrician, somebody that works for a Fortune 500 company and is the CEO. Have a passion, work hard, and do everything you can to be the very, very best that you can. Don't be lazy. Think outside the box. Be committed. That's what I would argue, because there is a need out there. There's a hunger out there for people who are very passionate about what they do, and are laser beam focused on trying to get what they want. And again, I'm not just talking about college. I'm talking about all other aspects of whatever you have a natural affinity for. That's what I would tell them.
Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Wade, that was pretty good. For me, I think it's having the drive and putting down and writing a goal down. And I think that, I think a lot of people, they say what they think they want to be, but they don't actually write it down. And I think if you don't write it down, you allow yourself to kind of sway in the wind, and then you go from here to there, and there's not that kind of commitment that's truly necessary. Clearly you're on the right path. The first critical decision, I always say life comes down to 5 decisions, and you're at one of them right now, which is, do you decide to finish high school or not? Right? You choose not to, and life is not as easy. Right? And the second one is, how do you continue your education? Learn a skill, right? Learn a skill, go to school if necessary, if that's the path. But those are the 2 things that I think I encourage, as we look at, students and making sure that, you write that goal, because it's amazing. Once you write it on a piece of paper, you stick it on a wall and you look at it every day. It's shocking what happens.
Yeah. Eddie, you work with a lot of students. Give us your best advice.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, if your students or your counselors out there, we're working with ACEs, and we'll get this information out to you. But I want you to know that our elementary, our middle, and our high schools are complementary to our career techs, our community colleges, our universities. If they're in school and you're in middle school, there's AOPA. I think Grayson put that out in the chat section, that you can see those programs to get involved with. We have STEM courses, we have programming courses, we're looking at logistic courses and things you can do in high school to get you prepped for that. Then you get into your community colleges and you look at getting your associate's degree. And maybe it's not immediate. A lot of our AMPs will do their AMP, get their certificate, go to Tinker AAR. They'll work for 4 or 5 years. Then they decide they want to become a supervisor or a work center section chief, and they need that degree, and they go and they get that 2-year degree, and then they go later on and get the 4-year degree. And as they grow, there is a natural way to grow in those career fields, and some of them are different paths. So if you're doing maintenance, it might be a little bit slower in certain areas, but you're complementing what you're getting on work experience, where if you do the programming and the engineering, then you might go straight into those universities, or do a dual thing where you're doing work and going to those opportunities. So that's where our community colleges come in, and they're very important because they give us that opportunity to go to work and then go to those schools and make that next step. So I want to make sure those things are laid out. That's my thing. I want to make sure it's important. And I know that our ACES group that Ryan's a part of and Wade's a part of is trying to lay that out so that you have that roadmap right in front of you and you can say, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. And not everyone needs to get their graduate degree, but it needs to be laid out so you can see it, so you can see that opportunity. And I want everyone to know that we are not in competition at Career Tech with universities or community colleges or elementary schools or anything. We are complementary to both or all. And that's what they need to understand, is that everyone in this panel, their primary interest is making sure we give them the very best workforce for Oklahoma that we can. And however
Grayson, you
we
get
do
the
that,
final
we'll do
word.
it.
Oh, sorry, Eddie, I didn't mean to step on you. Grayson, you get the final word.
The final word, no pressure. I think the thing that I would tell my 15-year-old self is be flexible. Be willing to go and move to that destination that you may not want to go to. If that first job or that first career opportunity is not what you had destined out to be your path, don't let that discourage you. As Ryan was saying, I think Wade may have said it too. We've all moved and we've all decided to do different things throughout our career. And some odds are you're going to come back to doing what you really wanted to do, what your dreams and your heart was set on originally. So be flexible, be willing to move around, and don't let the path that you have in your mind be the only path that's possible to an aviation aerospace career.
Well, gentlemen, I've enjoyed this conversation very much. We very much appreciate you taking part in our series of panel discussions on industry trends and employment opportunities. And we thank you for all your insights. They were just absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone else for watching, and everyone have a great afternoon.